Happy.
Welcome to the Modern Job Search Checklist. We are finally here. We're sorry we're a little late, but nevertheless, we are here and thank you very much for joining us. We come to you every single Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, unless somebody doesn't have a signal, but that's a whole nother story. We always try to be here for you to help answer your job search dilemmas. I know some of you have walked away from jobs, some of you got laid off jobs, some of you have been looking for a while. So we try to cater our questions to you. I mean, we're willing to disrupt whatever we got going on here to answer your questions. So say hi in the chat, wave to us, tell us where you're from, start thinking about your questions as we have our friend Loren Greiff here with us, and we're so thankful that she came to join us. And this is the first time she's come on this show. She was on my other show, Job Seeker Nation. She's a top 25 career coach with JobScan and joins me on that list. And she's a forever Bee Gees fan. I mean, by the title, can't you tell? I really respect that. And the Bee Gees are so much more than their great big giant album, Saturday Night Fever. That's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say. Yes, that was the album. I should know because I bought it back at the time when it was hot. I mean, but I really like the Bee Gees, even from get this. I go even back to Massachusetts.
Oh,
Now, Laura knows what I'm saying. Damien, you go, but yeah, that's how far back I go. I love those songs back then. I love those harmonies. So in part this episode's tribute to you, Lauren. So thank you very much for joining. In the meantime,
thank you. I want
let's
to make
see.
one correction. So I'm
Yes,
Loren Greiff. I just want to make sure that nobody thinks that I'm going to cause any
I
grief or
tell you, I
anything
tell
like that.
you, I default. I blame the Peanuts cartoon character, the characters, because they all say "good grief."
Right.
So I look at that and I automatically read grief. So it's Greif, Lauren Greif.
Thank you.
I should have went to your LinkedIn page and
Profile.
listened to the listen to the audio. That's a lesson for the rest of you. Hey, Annette Richmond, thank you very much for joining us. We can go ahead and get started with our questions. And really, uh, there are a lot of fractured job searches going on out there. We're going to try to get the rest of you. I want to be sure to also introduce Damien. I'm not going to worry about me so much, but Damien, we named the show partly after him because of his book, The Job Search Checklist. Is also his organization, Professionals in Transition, has helped more than 10,000 folks find jobs. He is the OG and the reason why I followed him for all these years. So definitely a lot of the inspiration comes from him. Let's go with the show. And we are just going to dig in a little bit. I think this is very important to kind of parse out here. What changes are you glad to see closer to being normalized since COVID began? Now, we've seen a lot of changes and people make a lot of claims, but I don't think there's things that are necessarily being normalized yet because of people in companies still making decisions. So we're going to start with Lauren, the girl in the group, to
Yes.
give us an idea of your thoughts on what are some things you're glad to see that's coming closer to being normalized.
I think the biggest thing that I see being normalized is the involvement of our personal and work lives, right? We're
Mhm,
seeing dogs, we're seeing kids, we're seeing people, in their houses, in their homes, in
mhm,
interviews, and the the fact that we are people outside of the professional world has become super normalized. People
mhm,
are a lot more embracing of, oh, hold on a minute, I need to go get my coffee, or interruptions that used to seem unprofessional.
mhm,
Ooh, my doorbell's ringing, or ooh, I had a kid just enter the room. This has become not only normalized, but it's happening regardless of what position you're in. And it's no longer like, seen as taboo, that we are real people uh, in our work life, in our personal life. And I think that also really ties into some level of being embraced as within the mental health area,
Mhm.
right?
Hmm.
People are saying I'm burnt out. People are saying, you know what, I need to go and take a rest because I'm suffering from burnout. People are more transparent, both in their ability to show themselves and also to reveal other parts of themselves that were previously less you know uh, accepted. I think
Hmm.
that there's been a
Right.
lot of conversations around that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight. I love that. Damien, what do you like that you're enjoying to see closer to being normalized in this post pandemic? Actually, we're kind of still in the middle of it, but nevertheless.
First, I'd like to say that I am glad I am not trying to do the show from a cornfield this year.
He won't let it go. He won't let it go. Because last week he was trying to get in the show. He was in the middle of the cornfield, and that internet connection just is not strong enough to get
Just did not work.
it right.
Ohio, no. Cornfield, no. But
I
but
know.
anyways, it's great to be able to be back and to have Loren join us
Yes.
and to actually have people be able to hear me.
Hmm.
Um, but going back to your question, I think one of the permanent things that are going to come out of COVID is the flexibility of
Hmm.
our work environments. I was reading an article yesterday saying that there would be no acceptance of work at home or a blended work environment if we
Hmm.
had not had the pandemic,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
companies would have told you we just can't do it. And the pandemic forced companies to figure out how.
Hmm.
And this has not only impacted the way that a company does business, but it has created a virtual space that didn't exist. People have learned how to use Zoom or in many of
Hmm.
the others. It has become socially acceptable to have meetings on Zoom as opposed to doing it in person. It has become much more efficient. But at the same time, that's brought up issues like, okay, so you're working at home, and depending on the company, they are finding ways to make you prove that you are at work. And software, this was another article that I read, uh, being installed on your personal computer or whatever interface you use to monitor your activity uh,
Hmm.
and the things that you are doing on your computer. And if you go off onto Amazon or what have you, make me very uncomfortable because it is very big brother ish.
Yeah.
And in a blended work environment or when you're working from home, like Loren talks about, you have kids that come in, you have dogs that bark, and you need that flexibility, number one. And number two, there's been a huge surge in productivity
Hmm.
because you are working on your own time and have the opportunity to stick with the project until it's done. Whereas at work, you get interrupted all the time.
Hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying is this new flexibility, this new viewpoint of how you get work done is kind of a double-edged sword. And as you work your way through this new way to get work done, it's something that you need to be sensitive to. And finally, uh, the idea of being able to work for major companies not in your geographic area by
Hmm.
doing it remotely has all of a sudden become possible. And as a result, what you get is this broadening of the workforce for a particular company because you no longer have to worry about ripping your family up and out and relocating. And again, before the pandemic, having this broad workforce available to you would have really thought to have been impossible.
Yeah, yeah. I love all of this because really, the essence of what the pandemic and what's being close to being normalized is the disruption. I
Mm,
mean, they're asking people are asking all the questions. Right, here's a perfect example of that. I don't know if you read the Forbes article recently. We talked about this on the Wednesday show about being paid every day,
Mm,
that being normalized, being paid every day as opposed to waiting every 2 weeks or maybe even every week. But the possibility is there, and I think there's good parts that mostly good. There might be one single bad part, but I think people want to name the bad parts that I've heard. A lot of people want to cite first has to do with people's behavior, and we're talking about maybe the 1, 2, or 3% that may mess up things for everybody else. But I think ultimately what we're seeing here is that people are looking at the pandemic and they're looking at it from different angles and asking why not. And
mhm,
one of the things is why not have normalized and not punish people for having their cats run across the camera, like we've had on Job Seeker Nation a couple of times. Jack's camera got infiltrated by by Jiggles, and it's so funny because it just all of a sudden you see this furry body walk across, but that was a lot of fun, and it made him seem very normal, that we live normal lives, and a lot of times as normal as we want to see people, all the transparency is good. Sometimes transparency isn't as good if people are just trying to be transparent to say they're being transparent, but they're being regular people and things happen naturally. We love that moment and it makes us feel like we connect with that person even more that we're talking with. And I think the one thing, unfortunately, I didn't think that we would get away with is the fact that, like you talk about, Damien, having software in a computer, because they've been doing that since remote was even possible. There's a software called Anywhere, I think it's called, where they install it and they can see your actions on your computer. If it was a company computer, it was arguable whether it could do it on a personal computer. But having said that, I think there's a level that may go up with trying
mhm.
to make a case for having people being watched, which I don't think is going to happen because there'll be too much pushback. Loren, did you have anything to add to that list of things that you are glad to see that's becoming normalized since COVID began?
I think we covered the key, the key areas. I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing, and I appreciate this so much, Damien, is that our work life as we have known it is forever changed,
Yes.
because this has proven across the board that there's an upside for everyone. Yes, some companies are still going to want to have that in person, and there are a lot of people that are saying, I feel disconnected. I don't feel like I'm able to wrangle my team in the same respect. But by and large, I have um, clarity around the fact that most people are so dang appreciative that they have the commute time back, that they
Hmm.
have the ability to, run their households with some, more increased oversight with their families. So I think that how we understood the separation between work and our personal lives has been, forever changed, and it's not necessarily going back the way that we knew it anyway.
Yeah, and it's going to be okay that it does.
Hmm.
And I think too, people also have to grow comfortable with the other side of it as well. Is that families and that exposure of revealing some of that personal life and what you reveal on camera, to make sure that it isn't something that's going to obstruct being hired. or
Mhm.
influencing your position, such as when you interview for a position. Let's say you're doing sales and you're going to be away from home, and they know now by watching a live or a Zoom call or something like that that you do have kids and or you do have a spouse, and that may influence someone's position. I hope that becomes more less of an issue than before, where you don't necessarily reveal that from the get-go because you're concentrated on presenting yourself as the best candidate to be hired.
Mhm.
So that's something I think it has to be toyed with still, that particular perception. Did you want to add anything, Damien, before we moved on?
Yes, very quickly, another trend, and I just accidentally hit this site, um,
Hmm.
is that you can, if you're willing to take the chance and do a lot of work, actually maintain two full-time jobs simultaneously if you are a remote worker. And
Hmm.
there are strategies that you can utilize so that you minimize the chances of each company finding out about each other, including ways to modify your LinkedIn profile. And I
Mm.
think the point here is that without this remote working environment, you would never think of taking on another full-time job. Part-time jobs, sure, people do it all the time, but I just find that concept a lot of work for one, but fascinating that you could actually pull that off to supplement your kid's college education or supplement your retirement. But again, and the site is overemployed.com. Fascinating.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, very interesting. I'd never heard of that site before. Have to go check that out. My friend Alex Levette wrote a book recently, back in 2019, called "Humanity Works," and in that book, she discusses how people already, even in 2019, that remote work was, that people are going to be able to manage two jobs and be able to manage everything else from their home, because of the way that remote work can be splintered, especially if you're not necessarily tied to the hours, but you're tied to the work and providing value. Um, that you have that opportunity to, you know, let's say you have that first job for your family, and maybe that second job might be a part-time remote where you have to pay insurance out of that, and especially if
Mm.
you're a 1099 independent contractor. We've yet to see, and I mentioned this before, how insurance and healthcare is going to have a day of reckoning, and how that's going to change, and also the education process and structure and infrastructure, how that's going to change in the future, and have its day of reckoning. So I think all of that's going to change the way, once those infrastructures fall, I think the world will definitely see everything kind of take a great big turn. So
Mhm.
let's move on. And I think there was a comment I saw on, I think it was Twitter recently. Somebody made an observation about work, and how the employer, and the quote is, an employer only owes an employee two things: a safe working environment and the agreed upon wages at the above the legal minimum.
Mhm.
Um, we may think that that is uh, something out of 1950, but honestly, that is something that's been constant since, even today as we know it. But I think there is something as well, as is that, the world going around and changing around it. Uh, like I said, everything is kind of up for grabs at this particular point,
Mhm.
right? Even the way we feel about some of the traditions that we hold and know to be true. Uh, Damien, I'm going to start with you. Do you feel like this statement still holds water, or do you think that there's a drip in a cup?
Oh no, actually, I think the water is flowing over like Niagara Falls.
Mm,
Uh, Having lived, I mean, originally I was in Ohio, of course, uh, before I relocated down here for
mhm,
a job. Uh, this is a right to work state, North Carolina,
mhm,
and your boss can literally walk through and not like your tie and let you go, and you have no recourse. I
mhm,
always kiddingly say that North Carolina is the state with no worker rights.
Mm.
And at one point, when I was let go, I did look into proceeding with legal action because I
mhm,
did have a case. But the lawyer said, listen, you can pay me $150 for as long as it takes. But I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to lose.
Mhm.
Uh, and and I said, okay. And here's what I learned: any state is going to have this problem, whether it's on the books or not. And
mhm,
the cure for that is to always focus on your transferable skills.
mhm,
It is your responsibility to keep your toolbox oiled up and shiny and ready to go at any time, because truly the only job security that you will ever have comes from within. And
Mm.
once you embrace that, then the way that you look at your job changes. You look at it like I do, which is a contractor. The
mhm,
way you do your job changes because all of a sudden spending hours gossiping and spreading rumors becomes unproductive, and your position is always only temporary in your mind, because any loyalty that you had for the company that you worked for or are working for is gone, because they have clearly demonstrated to you that they have absolutely no loyalty to
mhm,
you, and that you as an employee are always expendable. And
Mhm.
say what you may, but that's the way that it is. And if there's anybody out there that's feeling a little squirmy, my recommendation is please get used to it, because it will happen to you, because it's happened to me 5 times, and
mhm,
I'm a career expert. And most of the time it came out of the blue, was not appropriate, and devastated me.
Mm.
But you pick yourself up, you shake yourself off, you take your transferable skills, you begin a job campaign, and you market accordingly. And sadly, um, they lose, you win, life goes on.
Mhm.
yep,
Wow.
yep. That was powerful, and that was actually a great takedown of some things, some other things that we know to be true, that are up on the block, and the way. And I think um, employers, once you put something out there to be and I mean, I think that when this is said, you could take it as a tactic, but you can also take that as what reality actually is, and become unsentimental about who you work for and what you work for. And
Mhm.
I think that's where I really think the dividing line is, that people will become less enchanted by an employer, no matter how many, because they can't use, if we're remote, they can't use ping pong tables and donuts on Fridays to lure you back in into feeling great and mushy about them. They would have to find, right. I mean, isn't that true? Lauren, what are your
Absolutely.
thoughts about?
Wow. First of all, Damien, I am just awestruck. Thank you for your transparency, because it's true, right?
Yeah.
It's a cold, harsh world out there, and every state has certain legislation around employment at will, and
Mhm.
various. I know that California is a little bit more liberal, but by and large most states, you are employed at will, which
Yeah.
means you as the employer can do whatever you want whenever you want. And also, I do want to make this point that goes for you too as the employee, right? It's not just one-sided. You don't have a gun to your head to stay there. If you decide to leave, that same opportunity to leave, obviously on as best terms as you can, is still available to you. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing a lot of that happening with the Great Resignation. People are saying, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to stay here anymore. I don't want to leave. Millions of people are leaving because, whatever it was at that company was not satisfying to them, and was not engendering the kind of environment that they necessarily wanted to align to. So it works in both directions. As far as the obligation or what the bare minimum is that they are to provide, it's an equitable exchange, right? You are there to provide the value, and they get to decide whether that value is meeting the needs of the organization at any given time. And it's like an athlete or anything. You're only as good as your last whatever it is: sale, client meeting, execution, presentation, whatever it is. And to your point, Damien, about your transferable skills, yes, your investment into yourself, whether it's upskilling, cross-skilling, managing people, is not something that you can set and forget. It always needs to be constantly nurtured the way that other areas of your life are. I find that people are very much like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's like, that's great. Now tell me, what have you gained in that 20 years? What increase in value are you able to walk into the marketplace with? Because the 20 years isn't indicative of the value. That's just a placeholder for saying you've been there a long time. Now I want to know what you did with the time that you're there. Now I want to know how me, as maybe a hiring manager, is going to benefit from all that time.
You brought up some great points, both of you. I mean, the way that we think about work has been so sentimentalized, but to some degree poison and toxic, because it really doesn't do a lot of good. Understanding that what if marriage was that way? That no matter what, I can do whatever I want to you, and you really don't have a recourse. I mean, it's kind of like that, right? I mean, that's what it's been, and that's the way people grew up. And so I better not do X, Y, and Z. I better not show this. I better not feel this way. And at worst, we can blame it on the nights on Broadway, right, Loren? But nevertheless, but
Blame
besides
anything
the
on
point,
PGs, okay? You're not responsible for this.
but I think there is this idea, and I keep going back to this idea that and something you said, Loren, really triggered this. And I really believe that people can take control of their careers, the less uh, they'll be able to take more of the control of their careers, the less they're detaching themselves from their employer or potential employer, even. Because a lot of times we did wait at one point to get hired again to continue our career advancement as far as any training, right? Though we didn't see it as training, we thought it was keeping up with the trends of the job, which is true. But all in all, we kind of stop the show when we're not hired or we become too settled with our jobs. We stop the professional development when that's something that should be, as I've always said, as part of your lifestyle. That's something that should be part of your life, period. And if you want to, so that you have control what markets you go into, and you have control of what decisions you go into. So did Damien, did you have anything else to add?
Yes, I do. Thank you. First, I'd like to answer Annette's question regarding are there any states not like that? There are 27 non right to work or
Mm-hmm.
forced unionism is another term. And I'm not going to read all of them, but I was kind of surprised that there were 27, and it includes just a few: Alaska, California, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
Ohio, Massachusetts. Interestingly, oh no, I'm sorry, New York, Ohio, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin. The list goes on and on. And so, if
Mm-hmm.
you have not been exposed to a right to work state, your perception is different. I know that mine certainly was.
Mm-hmm.
And three things. One, when I was a young assistant buyer at May Company, which is now Macy's, my boss taught me four things. I called them Ed's rules, and it has worked well for me wherever I went, from job to job. And there's been a wide variation. And Mark, I promise to not tell the story about how I went from pots
Thank
and
you.
pans to mops, brooms, and brushes to uh, bras and panties. But here are the things: attitude, results, whatever it takes, and life is not an exact science.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take these four principles, plus understanding that you're there to do a job, and not be on a vacation, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
when you realize that it is your job to maximize your transferable skills and learn as much as you can without fearing for your job, because at one point you're going to lose it, it does
Mm-hmm.
something that is extremely valuable. And that is, you will no longer be afraid to network ferociously, both
Mm-hmm.
within the company and outside, and really utilize LinkedIn for what it was designed for, which
Mm-hmm.
is person to person networking. And here's the reason why I bring this up: your next job, 9 out of 10 times, is going to come through someone you know or someone who knows you. And when that day comes, when you're packing your stuff and leaving, if you have built a strong internal and external business network, people will help you in ways that you cannot plan or anticipate. And I'll end my little thought here by saying that every single job that I have ever had professionally in my life has come to me either through someone who knew me, someone that was a vendor or within the company, or someone that somebody else knew. And so I am a very strong advocate of not being afraid to network just because you're in a position, and should no longer be afraid of losing your job, because again, job security comes from within, and you can be bold in your efforts to connect with others.
Yeah. There's just one thing I'll have to say to Lauren. I know, Lauren, you're dying to come on, but Damien's comment made me think of that 80s movie with Michael J. Fox, and his boss tells him, "You see this time? This is God's time." And but you look at a lot of the 80s and half through the 90s movies and maybe beyond. Uh, it was very common that bullying was to be part of the expectation to get people to work. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of what we know is uh, sensible employment ethics these days, especially like the statement that we just talked about, that also a lot of this indicate what kind of world we were living in then and the kind of world that is changing to now. So I know you had some comments to add about it.
Oh, I mean, what I wanted to, augment or extend in terms of what Damien was sharing is,
Yeah.
yes, first of all, who you know, yes, true. Who knows you? And what I also wanted to introduce, who you don't know yet,
Hmm.
right?
Correct.
Right.
There's
Correct.
a whole audience of people who you don't know yet. right? Let's just call them your sixth, fifth, seventh level of connections. They're
Mhm.
people you don't know yet. And the strength of your network, surprisingly, even though, of course, you have people that you know from past jobs, from your alumni, from this, from that, from PTA, from sports.
Hmm.
Those people are great. Those people are, people who know you.
Mhm.
But the strength of your network is also commensurate with the amount of acquaintances you have. Those people who are way outside of your immediate skill set, who you who are in what I would like to say is, new ponds, right? They're
Hmm.
they're in other places that you have yet to visit, have their eyes and ears out to different opportunities, and they don't know you yet. And believe it or not, this is also from Malcolm Gladwell's, of course, The Tipping Point, and also from Mark Gansvetter, who way back in the day, in the 1970s, had a Stanford study called Weakling Strong Ties, right? We've all heard
Hmm.
of that. At least here
Right.
we have, right?
Right.
And what that says is that the people that actually were most instrumental in people's job searches were people that were their acquaintances that they saw very infrequently, over 60%, very infrequently. And so I just don't want anybody to overlook the fact that if you are networking regularly, you are not just staying within the confines of, let's just say, your industry, or within any specific vertical that is, let's just even say, comfortable, right? Get
Hmm.
outside of that. Stop staying in the same thing, because as a professor that I know, Noah Akins over at INSEAD, says, you'll be drinking dirty bathwater.
Oh.
You'll just be doing the same thing, recycling those same people, and they get tired. And so, you have to be constantly bringing in new streams of, opportunities, new people, new fish, in
Hmm.
order for you to make sure that you are not atrophying in your network as well.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, yeah,
So,
that's good stuff. The fact that, I think it brings back to your network serves a lot of different purposes, and I think your network also supports you through a lot of the changes that seem to take place that unexpected. I mean, you looked on LinkedIn, and if you have the right network, then you can have the right culture, and a lot of it's built around your network, right? So your
mhm,
experience is going to reflect the soul. So if you are being treated badly by your boss and you're being treated badly by the circumstances, you can reach out to your network for solutions and understanding. And what you said, even my friend Mark Miller, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, had said how your weak ties is really where the juice is at, as far as you changing careers and changing jobs and getting referrals, is that friend of a friend of a friend, very often, not so much your direct friends. So those things I think is pretty important. I think Teddy Burris, who's chiming in, he says keep your bathrobe clean by managing who you allow in your bathtub. And he loves that, Lauren. I definitely uh, that definitely makes me. I may use that tonight in the conversation. Who knows?
It's
But
all yours.
thanks. So let's keep it moving to our third final topic. And some of this has to do with a conversation I had due to something I wrote, and where I had said that personality is an essential part of interviewing. If you could stand out and show your personality instead of allowing yourself to be part of the Spanish Inquisition,
mhm.
that you'll have greater conversations. And somebody poo-pooed that, and there were other people that kind of followed through, which I'm cool with. I mean, I've written hundreds of articles at this particular point. I think I've heard every critique I could possibly hear, but you know. These days, a way people who can stand out is your personality. Most of the time, if you have a good personality, you want that to show and to be a part of it, especially if you're able to seamlessly insert humor as part of your presentation. naturally, I think people are actually drawn to that. I know I was as a hiring manager, and I know you were too, Damien.
Mhm.
So in these days is personality, because we're remote now and we don't have the opportunity to vibe like we used to. Is that becoming overrated, or is that still in the central part of being able to present yourself in a way that attracts an employer or a recruiter? Loren, your thoughts?
Oh my goodness. If you don't have a personality, it's very hard for people to want to work with you,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise they'll just hire a robot. And there are career paths that do require people to be heads down all the time, and they're not necessarily interactive. But
Right.
that doesn't mean they're void of personality, and it doesn't
That's
mean
true.
that they don't have the permission to bring it out. I
Hmm.
wholeheartedly believe that the best hiring is requires a lot of chemistry, and
Yeah.
the people that serve different teams in different cultures also can benefit from having people. Maybe there is somebody who's type A, and maybe there is
Hmm.
somebody who brings some levity to the group, and or somebody who is known for analytics, whereas there's other people that are known for really be able to facilitate great ideation. So you need those mixes, and that also isn't just a skill set; it's also a way of being. And
Hmm.
so people, in order for it to be a exciting place to go, or how many people are saying, I really want to be part of a collaborative team.
Hmm.
Collaborative team isn't people who are just siloed up in their boxes. A collaborative team means that there's conversation, that there's discussion, that there's a pushback, that there's alternate ways of thinking, and that can come out through personality. So if personality was not valued, then people would just go off of a resume and a piece of paper, and and,
Absolutely.
and that's and then the best resume would win, but the best resume doesn't necessarily make the best thought leader, influencer, impactor, team champion, or any of that. So I
Right.
really feel strongly.
Right, and it should reflect in parts of your LinkedIn profile. And your LinkedIn profile should have some parts of your personality displayed in some way, or at least when we watch you on video or in your writing or in your communication, that there's some parts of you that has levity. Otherwise, people may are not going to be drawn, because we're attracted to it. And it's not just humor; it's the fact that you say things with flair, or that you're able to express yourself in a dramatic way, or that you use your hands a lot when you talk, and all those things that really matter. You can chalk it up to communication if you want to, but a lot of that is also a part of your personality, because the way you do it expresses how you really feel about things, especially if we want to tell if you're passionate about a particular topic or a particular area or a particular job or not. Damien?
In our pre-meeting conversation, one of the things that we were talking about was if a recruiter gives you advice saying, this is a very conservative company, you have to
Hmm.
be very straight-faced, et cetera, et cetera. And my reaction is that if you have to dramatically alter your personality just to get a job, walk away, run away. Because in
Fly
my,
away if you have to.
oh yeah, absolutely. Um, because when you hide your personality and go into an environment that is not appropriate for you because of your personality, trust me, you will crash and burn
Hmm.
because you are not a good fit. And playing that game of looking like you fit is a real disservice to you, and it is a disservice to the company you're interviewing with. And it is far better to pass on an opportunity because, and this is the critical part, because it just doesn't feel right,
Hmm.
than going ahead because of the money. And I've said this before, but in my experience, every time when it's come to a hiring situation where I have gone against my intuition, I have hit the wall and splatted in a phenomenal way and have vowed to not do that again because of the impact that it has on you. So, bottom line, if it feels good, it will be good. If it doesn't feel good, walk away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely agree. And Annette agrees with both of you. And sometimes we do find out the hard way that we're suppressing ourselves. It seems unauthentic, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I had to bring the A word in
Well, I was
authentic
actually going to
earlier.
take it a little step further and
Yeah.
say it's dishonest. It's
Yes.
dishonest to yourself
Mm-hmm.
and it's dishonest to them because you're
Mm-hmm.
essentially going in there and saying, I, I am this when you know that you're really not. So I
Right.
think that there's a level of clarity that you need to make peace with before, and I too have had this happen. I mean, at one point in my life, I worked on Wall Street and after 6 weeks, somebody brought me in and they said, you're a square peg in a round hole. And at the time
Mm.
I was shocked and they
Hmm.
were right,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right. And I was dishonest with myself, trying to force fit myself into this square peg, and I was not, and they saw it, but I mean I was too young to actually understand that was part of the process, is actually aligning to fit, that was actually a thing, and it's a big thing, it's the thing.
Right.
So I think that there is a level of personal accountability that you have to yourself and say, you know what, if I do that, I'm not just being dishonest to somebody else. Most importantly, as Damien said, I'm being dishonest to myself.
Yeah. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with being a square
Mhm.
at times. My wife has been calling me a square for 30 something years. Uh, of course, there's other parts to that, but I think that, being a square, if that's part of you and who you really are, and people like that you're a square, that's fine.
Right.
Then that's fine. But I think what we're discussing here is the fact that you're suppressing yourself, your true self, to fit in a room where it seems you may perceive that it might be straight, and it really isn't, because people may look at the presentations, they may look at the work, they may even look at the volume of work. So we are going to have a little bit of shorter show this time. So first of all, thank you, Loren, because she has a hard stop at 1 o'clock to get out of here.
Thank you. I am
Yes, thank
so
you.
appreciative of both of you. I learned so much from this conversation myself. Thank you, everyone who joined, and I will catch you guys in the world of LinkedIn. Damien, Mark, thank you again and again. My
Yep.
pleasure, always.
Yep. And be sure you catch her if you're interested in knowing. Just follow her profile. She's also at
Yes.
portfoliorocket.com. So we want to
Bye,
be sure
guys.
we put that
Thanks
in.
again.
We'll
Have a
see you
wonderful,
later,
wonderful
Lauren.
night.
Uh,
Thanks a million.
uh, Damien, this is our time where we talk about what we got coming up
Mhm.
as far as anything on social media or in the media that's happening that we want people to know about.
Thank you, Mark. I don't know if anybody out there saw the Go Banking article that ran yesterday. There are several articles upcoming in Upjourney, and I just got asked to write for a another publication that's coming up, and then Aaron Moran wrote an article for AARP that's is going to appear in their magazine in October.
You must mean Gwen Moran. Uh,
Sorry.
uh,
Yes.
Erin Moran was on Happy Days. That's the
So
actress,
close. You
and
know what I mean?
who hasn't been on TV in 40 years about? But
Right.
that's okay. We all default. I default to as we were talking about 70s music, right now I hear Burn Baby Burn Disco Inferno for some reason. But yeah, yep, okay. Gwen Moran, I know her as well. She writes for several different publications. So good job. Yes, I read the gold banking article that you were involved in. It's funny, you were. I think your article was published on Tuesday or something like that, and
Mhm.
the one that I was involved in was published yesterday. Yes, shout out to Gabrielle who wrote the article, both articles,
Mhm.
and I got some other things that are coming up, but particularly, most notably, if you have been watching my LinkedIn profile, I do the Voice of Job Seekers Live, and I do some of these shows that are not on the podcast, that are just on the live stream for right now. That Monday, I'll be talking to Magali Renee. She was just recently on Good Morning America and a few other channels as well, talking about compassionate leadership. So join me here at 9 o'clock a.m. Central, 10 o'clock Eastern for that show. Watch my LinkedIn and Facebook or Twitter profile for that show. It's going to be a great one. In the meantime, thank you all. We always show up somewhere around 1 p.m. Central on Fridays. We were a little late today, and that was okay. In the meantime, come back to us 1 p.m. next week. We'll have guests and we'll have more conversation and hopefully answer your job search dilemmas that are involved. Thank you very much, Annette, for joining us. Teddy, Kevin Turner, thank you very much for joining us. And a few others of you, if I who admit, did I get Annette? I think I got Annette first. But thank the rest of you for joining us and joining in the chat. Come back. We'll take care of you and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you later.